like this port, Gerald. As a matter of fact, Finchley assures me it's exactly the same port that your father gets from him.
Then it'll be all right. The governor prides himself on being a good judge of port. I don't pretend to know much about it.
I should jolly well think so, Gerald. I'd hate you to know all about port, like one of these purple-faced old men.
Here, I'm not a purple-faced old man.
No, not yet. But then, you don't know all about port, do you?
Now then, Sybil, you must take a little. Special occasion, you know?
Yes, go on, Mummy. You must drink our health.
Very well then, just a little. Thank you. All right, Edna. I'll ring from the drawing room when we want our coffee, probably in about half an hour.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, this is very nice, very nice. Good dinner, too. Tell cook for me.
Absolutely. First class.
Arthur, you're not supposed to say such things.
Oh, come. I'm treating Gerald as one of the family, and I'm sure he won't object.
Go on, Gerald. Just you object.
Wouldn't dream of it. In fact, I insist upon being one of the family now. I've been trying long enough, haven't I? Haven't I? You know I have.
Of course she does.
Yes, well, except for all last summer when you never came near me. And I wondered what had happened to you.
And I've told you I was awfully busy at the works all that time.
Yes, that's what you say.
Now, Sheila, don't tease him. When you're married, you'll realize that men with important work to do sometimes have to spend all their time and energy on their business. You'll have to get used to it just as I did. Isn't that so, Arthur?
Oh, quite.
I don't believe I will. So you be careful.
Oh, I will.
Now, what's the joke?
I don't know. I just felt I had to laugh.
You're squiffy.
I'm not.
What an expression, Sheila, really. The things you girls pick up these days.
Oh, if you think that's the best you can do.
Don't be an arse, Eric.
Now stop it, you two. Arthur, what about this famous toast of yours?
Yes, of course. Now, Gerald, I know that you agree that we should only have this quiet little family party. It's a pity that Sir George and Lady Croft can't be with us, but they're abroad and can't be helped. As I told you, they wrote me a very nice cake. It couldn't be nicer. So I'm not sorry we're celebrating quietly like this.
Oh, much nicer, really.
I quite agree.
So do I. But it makes speech-making more difficult.
Well, don't do any.
What?
Don't do any.
Oh, yes, I will. This is one of the happiest nights of my life. And one day, I hope, Eric, when you've a child of your own, you'll understand why. Now, Gerald, I must tell you frankly and without pretenses that your engagement to Sheila means a tremendous lot to me. She'll make you happy. I'm sure you'll make her happy. You're just the kind of son-in-law I've always wanted. Now, your father and I have been friendly rivals in business for some time now, though, of course, Limited is both older and bigger than Birling and Company. And now you've brought us together. And perhaps we may look forward to a time when Crofts and Birling are no longer competing, but are working together for lower costs and higher prices.
Here! And I think my father would agree to that too.
Now, Arthur, I don't think you ought to talk business on an occasion like this.
Neither do I. All wrong.
Well, I quite agree with you. I only mentioned it in passing. But what I wanted to say is that I think Sheila's a lucky girl, and Gerald, I think you're a pretty fortunate young man too.
I know I am. Just this once, anyhow.
So here's wishing the pair of you the very best that life can bring to Gerald and Sheila.
All the best.
Yes, Gerald.
All the best. She can have a nasty temper sometimes. I'm sure it's not all bad, really. Good old Sheila.
Yes, Sheila, darling. Congratulations and our very best wishes.
Thank you.
Chump, I can't drink to this, can I? When do I drink?
You can drink to me.
All right then. I drink to you.
And I drink to you. And hope I can make you as happy as you deserve to be.
You be careful, or I'll start weeping.
Well, perhaps this will help to stop it.
Oh, Gerald, you've got it. Is it the one you wanted me to have?
Yes, the very one.
Oh, it's wonderful. Look, Mummy, isn't it a beauty? Oh, darling.
Steady, old girl. The buffs.
I think it's perfect. Now I really feel engaged.
As you are, darling. It's a lovely ring. Now be careful with it.
Careful! Oh, I'll never let it go out of my sight for an instant. Look, Eric.
It came just at the right moment. That was clever of you, Gerald. Now, Arthur, if you've nothing more to say, Sheila and I had better go into the drawing room and leave you men.
I just want to say this. Sheila, are you listening? This concerns you too.
Sorry, Daddy. Actually, I was listening.
I want to say that I'm delighted by your engagement, and I hope that it won't be too long before you're married. And another thing, you can ignore all these silly talks about these days. And I speak as a hard-headed businessman who has to take risks and knows what he's about. And I say you can ignore all this silly, pessimistic talk. When you marry, you'll be marrying at a very good time. Yes, a very good time. And soon it will be an even better time.
I believe you're right, sir.
What about war?
What? Oh, don't interrupt, Eric. I was just coming to that. Just because the Kaiser makes a speech or two, or a few German officers have too much to drink and stop talking nonsense, you'll hear some people say that war's inevitable. To that, I say fiddlesticks. The Germans don't want war. Nobody wants war, well, except a few half-civilized folks in the Balkans. And why? Because there's too much at stake. There's everything to lose and nothing to gain by war.
Yes, I know, but it's just
Don't
that...
interrupt, I haven't finished. You've a lot to learn yet. And I'm speaking as a hard-headed, practical man of business, and I say there isn't a chance of war. Why, look at the world's developing so fast, it'll make war impossible. Ah, look at all the progress we're making. In a year or two, we'll have airplanes that will be able to go anywhere. And look at how the automobile's making headway, bigger and faster all the time. And then ships. A friend of mine went over this new liner last week. 46,800 tons. 46,800 tons. New York in 5 days. And every luxury. And unsinkable. Absolutely unsinkable. That's what you've got to keep your eye on. Facts like that. Progress like that. And not some silly German officers talking nonsense and a few scaremongers here making a big fuss about nothing. Now, you three young people, you listen to this. Remember what I'm telling you. 20 or 30 years' time, let's say your 40s, you may be giving a little party like this. Your son or daughter might be getting engaged. And by that time, you'll be living in a world that will have forgotten all these capital and labor agitations and all these silly war scares. There'll be peace and prosperity and rapid progress everywhere. Well, except of course in Russia, which will always be behindhand, naturally.
Yes, dear, I know.
Yes, dear, I know. I'm talking too much. But we can't let these Bernard Shaws and H.G. Wellses do all the talking. We hard-headed, practical businessmen have to say something sometimes. If we don't guess, we've had experience, and we know.
Yes, of course, dear. Well, don't keep Gerald in here too long. Eric, I want you a moment.
Cigar?
No thanks. I can't really enjoy them.
Ah, you don't know what you're missing. Ah, I like a good cigar myself. Oh, help yourself to the port.
Thanks.
By the way, I wanted to mention something to you in strict confidence while we're by ourselves. I have an idea that your mother, Lady Croft, well, she doesn't object to my girl, feels that you might have done better for yourself socially. No, Gerald, it's all right. Don't blame her. She's an old county family, landed people and all that, so it's only natural. But what I wanted to say is that there may be a good chance that I'll find my way on the next honors list. Just a knighthood, of course.
Oh, I say, congratulations!
Oh, thanks. No, but it's too early for that, so don't say anything. But I can hint or two. You see, I was Lord Mayor here 2 years ago when royalty visited us, and I've always been regarded as a sound and useful party man. So I gather there's a fair chance of a knighthood. So long as we behave ourselves, but don't get into police court or start a scandal or anything like that.
You seem to be a very well-behaved family to me.
Thanks, we think we are.
So if that's the only obstacle, sir, I think you might as well accept my congratulations now.
Thank you. No, I couldn't, so don't say anything.
Oh, I say, could I say something to my mother? I know she'd be delighted.
Well, when she comes back, you might drop a hint or two.
What's up? You're telling your stories, yeah?
No. Want another glass of port?
Yes, please. Mother says we mustn't stay too long, though I don't think that matters. I left them talking about clothes again. You'd think a girl never had any clothes before she was married. Women are party about it.
Yes, but you must remember, my boy, that women, clothes mean something quite different to women. Not just something to wear, not only something to make them look prettier, but a sort of sign or token of their self-respect.
That's true.
Yes, I remember that.
Well, what do you remember?
Nothing?
Nothing.
Sounds a bit fishy to me.
Yes. You don't know what these boys get up to nowadays. More money to spend and time to spare than I had when I was Eric's age. They worked us hard and kept us short of cash. Though, even then, we broke out and had a big fun sometimes.
I bet you did.
But this is the point. And I don't want to lecture you two young fellows again. But what so many of you don't seem to realize now when things are easier is that every man has to make his own way, has to look after himself, and his family too, when he has one. And so long as he does that, he won't come to any harm. But the way these cranks talk and write now, you'd think that everybody has to look after everybody else. Like we were all mixed up together like bees in a hive. A man has to mind his own business, has to look after his own and his family.
Someone at the front door?
Well, it's all right, Eric. Edna will get it. Have another glass of port, Gerald, and then we'll join the ladies. That'll stop me from giving you good advice.
Yes, you piled it on a bit tonight, Father.
Well, special occasion and feeling contented for once. I wanted you to have the benefit of my experience.
Please, sir.
Yes,
An inspector's called.
an inspector. What kind of inspector?
A police inspector. He says his name's Inspector Goole.
Don't know him. Does he want to see me?
Yes, sir. He says it's important.
All right, Edna, show me. Might be something about a warrant. I'm still on the bench.
Eric's probably been up to something. That would be awkward, wouldn't it?
Very.
Yeah, what do you mean? Only something we were talking about before you came in. A joke, really.
I don't think it's very funny.
What's the matter with you?
Nothing.
Inspector Goole.
Mr. Birling?
Yes. Good evening, Inspector. You new, aren't you?
Yes, sir. Only recently transferred.
I thought you might be. I was alderman for years and Lord Mayor 2 years ago, and I'm still on the bench, so I know the Brumley police officers fairly well, and I thought I'd never seen them before.
Pray, sir.
Would you like a glass of port or some whiskey?
Oh, no, thank you, Mr. Birling. I'm on duty.
Well, what can I do for you? Some trouble about a warrant?
No, Mr. Birling.
Well, what is it then?
I'd like some information if you don't mind. 2 hours ago, a young woman died in the infirmary. She was taken there this afternoon because she'd swallowed a lot of strong disinfectant. Burnt her inside out, of course.
My God.
Yes, She was in great agony. They did everything they could for her at the infirmary, but she died. Suicide, of course.
Yes, yes. Horrible business. But I don't see why you should come here, Inspector.
I've been round to the room she had, and she'd left a letter there and a sort of diary. Like a lot of these young women who get into various kinds of trouble, she'd used more than one name, but her original name, her real name, was Eva Smith.
Eva Smith?
Do you remember her, Mr. Birling?
No. I seem to recall that name, Eva Smith, but it doesn't convey anything to me. And I don't see where I should come into this.
She was employed in your works at one time.
Oh, that's it. Well, we've over hundreds of women there, and they keep changing.
This young woman, Eva Smith, was a bit out of the ordinary. I found a photograph of her in her lodgings. Perhaps you'd remember her from that.
Any particular reason why I shouldn't see that girl's photograph, Inspector?
There might be.
And the same applies to me, I suppose?
Yes.
I can't imagine what it could be.
Neither can I.
Well, I must say I agree with the Inspector.
It's the way I like to go to work. One person and one line of inquiry at a time, otherwise there's a muddle.
I see. I think you've had enough of that port, Eric.
I think you remember Eva Smith now, don't you, Mr. Birling?
Yes, I do. She was one of my employees, and then I discharged her.
Is that why she committed suicide? When was this, Father?
Just be quiet, Eric, and don't get excited. This must have been almost 2 years ago. Let me see. Early autumn of 1910.
Yes, end of September 1910.
That's right.
Look here, sir. Wouldn't you rather I was out of this?
Oh, I don't mind your being here, Gerald. And in fact, I'm sure you have no objection, have you? I might mention that this is Mr. Gerald Croft, son of Sir George Croft. You know, Crofts Limited.
Mr. Gerald Croft?
Yes, incidentally, we've been modestly celebrating his engagement to my daughter Sheila.
I see. Mr. Croft is going to marry Miss Sheila Birling?
I hope so.
Then I prefer you to stay.
Oh, all right.
Look here, Inspector. There's nothing mysterious about this business, at least not so far as I'm concerned. It's a perfectly straightforward case. And as it happened more than 18 months ago, nearly 2 years ago, obviously it has nothing to do with the wretched girl's suicide. Okay?
No, sir, I can't agree with you there.
Why not?
Because what happened to her then may have determined what happened to her afterwards. And what happened to her afterwards may have driven her to suicide, a chain of events.
Oh, well, I see. Put like that, there's something to what you say. Still, I can't accept any responsibility. If we were all responsible for everything that happened to everybody that we'd ever had anything to do with, well, it would be very awkward, wouldn't it?
Very awkward.
We'd all be put into an impossible position, wouldn't we?
By Jove, yes. And as you were saying earlier, Dad, a man has to make his own way, in my view.
No, but we didn't go into that.
Go into what?
Oh, before you came, I was just giving these two young fellows a piece of good advice. Now, Inspector, about this girl, I remember her quite well now. Lively, good-looking girl, country-bred, I fancy. She'd been working in one of our machine shops for over a year. And in fact, the foreman told me he was ready to promote her to what we call a leading operator, head of a small group of girls. But when they came back from their holidays that August, they were all rather restless, and they decided to ask for more money. Now, they had been averaging 22 shillings per week, which is neither more nor less than what is generally paid in our industry. They wanted the rates raised so that they could average 25 shillings a week. Well, I refused, naturally.
Why?
What? Did you say why?
Yes. Why did you refuse?
Well, I don't see it's any concern of yours how I choose to run my business. It isn't now.
Might be, you know.
I don't like your tone.
I'm sorry, but you asked me a question.
Yes, and you asked me a question too before that. A very unnecessary question too.
It's my duty to ask questions.
Well, it's my duty to keep labor costs down. And if I had agreed to this demand, I would have added 12% to our labor costs. Does that satisfy you? So I refused. said I couldn't consider it. We were paying the usual rates, and if they didn't like those rates, they could go out and work somewhere else. It's a free country, I told them.
It isn't if they can't get work somewhere else.
Quite so.
Now look, just you stay out of this. You hadn't even begun in the works when this happened. So, they went on strike. Well, that didn't last long, of course.
Not that it was just after the summer holidays. They'd be all broke if I knew then.
Right, Gerald, they mostly were, and so was the strike. Oh, it was a pitiful affair. Well, we forgave them, and we took them back at their old rates, except for the 4 or 5 ringleaders. And this girl, I told them, clear out. This girl, this Eva Smith, she was one of them. She'd had an awfully lot to say, I remember. Far too much. So she had to go.
You couldn't really have done anything else.
He could. He could have kept her on instead of throwing her out. I call it tough luck.
Rubbish! If you don't come down sharply on some of these people, they'd soon be asking for the earth.
I should say so.
Well, they might, but it's better to ask for the earth than to take it.
What did you say your name was again, Inspector?
Goole. Goole. Yes. And how do you get along with our chief constable, Colonel Roberts?
I don't see much of him.
Yeah. Well, I it's fair to warn you that he's a friend of mine, and I see him fairly frequently. In fact, we play golf together down at the West Front.
I don't play golf.
Well, I didn't suppose you did.
Well, I think it's a damn shame.
No, I never wanted to play.
No, I mean about this girl, Eva Smith. Why shouldn't you try for the highest possible wages? We try for the highest possible prices, and I don't see why she should have been sacked just because she's a bit more spirit than the others. You said yourself she was a good worker. I would let her stay.
Unless you brighten your ideas, you won't be in any position to let anybody stay or tell anybody to go. It's time you learned to face a few responsibilities around here. That's something that this public school and varsity life that you've led doesn't seem to have taught.
Well, we don't need to tell the inspector about all that, do we?
I don't see that we need to tell the inspector anything more. In fact, there's nothing more I can tell them. I told the girl to clear out, and she went, and I haven't heard from her since. Have you any idea what happened to her afterwards? Did she get into trouble? Go on the streets?
She didn't exactly go on the streets.
What's this about streets? Oh, sorry. I didn't know. Mummy sent me in to ask why you didn't come along to the drawing room.
Oh, we shall be along in a minute. Just finishing.
I'm afraid not.
Look, there's nothing else. I just told you that.
What's all this about?
Nothing to do with you, Sheila. Run along.
No, wait a minute, Miss Birling.
Now look here, Inspector. I find this uncalled for and officious. I've half a mind to report you. I told you everything I know, and it doesn't seem to me to be very much. Now there's no reason why my daughter should be dragged into this unpleasant business.
What business? What's happening?
I'm a police inspector, Miss Birling. This afternoon, a young woman drank some disinfectant and died after several hours of agony tonight in the infirmary.
How horrible. Was it an accident?
No, she wanted to end her life. She felt she couldn't go on any longer.
Well, don't tell me that's because I discharged her from my employment 2 years ago.
That might have started it.
Did you, Dad?
Yes! She was causing trouble in the works. I feel I was quite justified.
Yes, I think you were. I know we'd have done the same thing. Don't look like that, Sheila.
Sorry, it's just that I can't help thinking about this girl. Destroying herself so horribly. And I've been so happy tonight. Oh, I wish you hadn't told me. What was she like? Quite young?
Yes, 24.
Pretty?
She wasn't pretty when I saw her today, but she had been pretty, very pretty.
That's enough of that.
And I don't see that this inquiry gets you anywhere, Inspector. It's what's happened to her since she left Mr. Birling's works that's important.
Obviously, I suggested that some time ago.
And we can't help you there, because we don't know.
Are you sure you don't know?
Are you suggesting that one of them may know something about the girl's life?
Yes.
Ah. So you didn't come here just to see me then?
No.
Oh, well. Oh, If I had known that earlier, I wouldn't have called you officious and talked about reporting. You understand that, don't you, Inspector? I thought that for some reason, best known to yourself, you were making the most out of this tiny bit of information that I could give you. Well, this makes a difference. I apologize. Now, you're quite sure of your facts?
Some of them, yes.
They don't seem to amount to very much, though, do they?
The girl's dead, though.
What do you mean by saying that? You talk as if we were responsible.
Now, Inspector, why don't you and I just we'll go and talk this over quietly in the corner?
Why should you? He's finished with you. He says it's one of us now.
Yes, and I'm trying to settle it sensibly for you.
Well, there's nothing to settle, as far as I'm concerned. I've never known an Eva Smith.
Neither have I.
Was that her name? Eva Smith?
Yes.
I've never heard it before.
So, where are you now, Inspector?
Where I was before, Mr. Croft. I told you that, like a lot of these young women, she'd use more than one name. She was still Eva Smith when Mr. Birling sacked her for wanting 25 shillings a week instead of 22. Then she stopped being Eva Smith. Perhaps she'd had enough of it.
Can't blame her.
I think it was a mean thing to do. Perhaps that spoiled everything for her.
Rubbish! Have you any idea what became of her after she left my employment?
Yes. She was out of work for the next 2 months. Both her parents were dead, so she'd no home to go back to. And she hadn't been able to save much out of what Birling and Company had paid her, so after 2 months, with no work, no money coming in, and living in lodgings with no relatives to help her, few friends, lonely, half-starved, she was feeling desperate.
I should think so. It's a shame.
There are a lot of young women living that sort of existence, Miss Birling, in every city and big town in this country. If there weren't, the factories and warehouses wouldn't know where to look for cheap labor. Ask your father.
But these girls aren't cheap labor. They're people.
I've had that notion myself from time to time. In fact, I thought that it would do us all a bit of good if sometimes we tried to put ourselves in the place of these young women, counting their pennies in their dingy little back bedrooms.
Yes, I expect it would. But what happened to her then?
She had what seemed to her a wonderful stroke of luck. She'd been taken on in a shop, and a good shop too, Millward's.
Millward's? We go there. In fact, I was there this afternoon. For your benefit.
Good.
Yes, she was lucky to get taken on at Millward's.
That's what she thought. And it happened that, at the beginning of December that year, 1910, there was a good deal of influenza about, and that gave her her chance. And from what I can gather, she liked working there. It was a nice change from a factory. She enjoyed the pretty clothes, I've no doubt. And now she felt she was making a good fresh start. You can imagine how she felt.
Yes, of course.
Got herself into trouble there, I suppose.
After about a couple of months, just when she felt she was settling in, she was told she had to go.
Not doing her work properly?
There was nothing wrong with the way she was doing her work. They admitted that.
Well, there must have been something wrong.
All she knew was that a customer had complained about her, and so she had to go.
When was this?
At the end of January 1910.
What did this girl look like?
If you come over here, I'll show you.
What's the matter with her? Why the devil do you want to go upsetting the child like that?
I didn't do it. She's upsetting herself.
Well, why? Why?
I don't know yet. That's something I have to find out.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll find out first.
Shall I go to her?
No, leave this to me. I've got to talk to my wife in any case. Tell her what's been happening. We were having such a nice family celebration, and the nasty mess you've made of it now, haven't you?
That's more or less what I was thinking earlier tonight.
What?
When I was in the infirmary looking at what's left of Eva Smith, a nice little promising life that I thought, and a nasty mess somebody's made of it.
I'd like to have a look at that photograph now, Inspector.
All in good time, Miss Croft.
Well, I don't see
You heard what I said before, Mr. Croft. One line of inquiry at a time. Otherwise, we'll all be talking at once and won't know where we are. If anything to tell me, you'll have the opportunity of doing it soon.
Well, I don't suppose I have
Look
anything
here.
to tell.
I've had enough of this.
I dare say.
I'm sorry, but we were having a little party, and I've had a few drinks, including rather a lot of champagne, and I've a headache. So, seeing as I'm only in the way here, I think I'd better turn in.
I think you'd better stay here.
Why should I?
It might be less trouble if you turn in. You might have to turn out again soon.
Getting a bit heavy-handed, aren't you, Inspector?
Possibly, but if you're easy with me, I'm easy with you.
After all, you know, we're respectable citizens and not dangerous criminals.
Sometimes there isn't as much difference as you think. Often if it's left to me, I don't know where to draw the line.
Fortunately, it isn't left to you, is it?
No, it isn't. But some things are left to me. Inquiries of this sort, for instance. Well, Miss Birling,
You knew it was me all the time, didn't you?
I had an idea it might be from something the girl herself wrote.
I've told my father about it. He didn't seem to think it amounted to much, but I felt rotten about it at the time. Now I feel a lot worse. Did it make much difference to her?
Yes, I'm afraid it did. It was the last real steady job she had. When she lost it, for no reason that she could discover, she decided she might as well try another kind of life.
So I'm really responsible.
No, not entirely. A good deal happened to her after that, but you're partly to blame, just as your father is.
But what did Sheila do?
I went to the manager at Millwoods and told him that if they didn't get rid of this girl, I'd never go near the place again, and I'd persuade Mother to close her account with them.
And why did you do that?
Because I was in a furious temper.
And what had the girl done to make you lose your temper?
When I was looking at myself in the mirror, I caught sight of her smiling at the sales girl, and I was absolutely furious. I'd been in a bad temper anyhow.
And was it the girl's fault?
No, not really. I suppose it was my own fault. All right, Gerald, you needn't look at me like that. At least I'm trying to tell the truth. I expect you've done things you're ashamed of.
Well, I never said I had.
Never mind about that. You're going to settle that between you afterwards. What happened?
I'd gone in to try something on. It was an idea of my own. Mother had been against it, and so had the sales girl, but I insisted. As soon as I tried it on, I knew they'd been right. It just didn't suit me at all. I looked silly in the thing. Well, this girl had brought the dress up from the workroom, and when the sales girl, Miss Frances, had asked her something about it, this girl, to show us what she meant, had held the dress up as if she was wearing it, and it just suited her. She was the right type for it, just as I was the wrong type. She was a very pretty girl too, with soft, fine hair and big grey eyes. That didn't make it any better. Well, when I looked at myself, tried the thing on, and knew that it was all wrong, I caught sight of her smiling at Miss Frances, as if to say, "Doesn't she look awful?" And I was absolutely furious. I lost my temper. I was very rude to both of them. Then I went to the manager and told him that this girl had been very impertinent, and how could I know what would happen afterwards? If she'd been some miserable, plain little creature, I don't suppose I'd have done it. But she looked as if she could take care of herself. I couldn't be sorry for her.
In fact, in a kind of way, you might be said to have been jealous of her.
Yes, I suppose so.
So you used the power you had, as the daughter of a good customer and of a man well known in the town, to punish her just because she made you feel like that.
Yes, but it didn't seem to be anything very terrible at the time. Don't you understand? And if I could help her now, I would...
Yes, but you can't. It's too late. She's dead.
My God, it's a bit thick. If you come to think of it,
Shut up, Eric! I know. It's the only time I've ever done anything like that, and I'll never do it again to anybody. I've noticed them giving me a sort of look sometimes at Millwoods. I noticed it even this afternoon, and I suppose some of them remember. I feel now I can never go there again. Oh, why did this happen?
That's what I asked myself tonight when I was looking at that dead girl, and then I said to myself, well, we'll try to understand why it had to happen. And that's why I'm here. And I'm not going until I know all that happened. Eva Smith lost her job at Birling and Company because the strike failed and they were determined not to have another one. At last she found another job, under what name I don't know, in a big shop, and had to leave there because you were annoyed with yourself and passed your annoyance on to her. Now she had to try something else. So first, she changed her name to Daisy Renton.
Can I get myself a drink, Sheila?
Where is your father, Miss Birling?
He went into the drawing room. Eric, will you take the inspector along there, please? Well, Gerald,
Well, what, Sheila?
how did you come to know this girl? Eva Smith?
I didn't.
Daisy Renton, then. It's the same thing.
Why should I have known her?
Don't be stupid, Gerald. We haven't much time. You gave yourself away as soon as you mentioned your other name.
All right, I knew her. Let's leave it at that.
We can't leave it at that.
Now, listen,
No,
darling.
that's no use. You not only knew her, but you knew her very well. Otherwise, you wouldn't look so guilty about it. When did you first get to know her? Was it after she left Millwoods? When she changed her name, as he said, and began to lead a different sort of life. Were you seeing her last spring and summer? During that time when you hardly came near me and said you were so busy? Were you? Yes, of course.
I'm sorry, Sheila, but it was all over and done with last summer. I haven't set eyes on the girl for the last 6 months. Now, don't come into this suicide business.
I thought I didn't. Half an hour ago.
You don't! Neither of us does. So for God's sake, don't say anything to the inspector.
About you and this girl?
Yes, we can keep it from him.
Why, you fool! He knows. Of course he knows. And I hate to think how much he knows that we don't know yet. You'll see. You'll see.
Well,
You see? What did I tell you?
what did you tell him?
Inspector, I think Miss Birling ought to be excused from any more of this questioning. She's told you all she knows. She's had a long, exciting, and tiring day. We were celebrating our engagement, you know. And now she's obviously had about as much of this as she can stand. You heard her.
He means I'm getting hysterical now.
And are you?
Probably.
Well, I don't want to keep you here. I have no more questions to ask you.
No, but you haven't finished asking questions, have you?
No.
You see? Then I'm staying.
Why should you? It's bound to be unpleasant and disturbing.
And you think young women ought to be protected against unpleasant things?
If possible, yes.
Well, we know one young woman who wasn't, don't we?
I suppose I asked for that.
Be careful you don't ask for any more, Gerald.
I only meant to say to you, why stay when you'll obviously hate it?
It can't be worse for me than it has been. And it might be better.
I see.
What do you see?
You've been through it, and now you want to see someone else go through it.
So that's what you think I'm really like? I'm glad I realised it in time, Gerald.
No, I didn't mean...
Yes, you did. And if you'd really loved me, you couldn't have said that. You listened to that nice story about me. I got that girl sacked from Millwoods. And now you've made up your mind I must obviously be a selfish, vindictive creature.
I neither said that nor even suggested it.
Then why say I want to see somebody else put through it? That's not what I meant at all.
All right, then, I'm sorry.
Yes, but you don't believe me. And this is just the wrong time not to believe me.
Allow me, Miss Birling. I can tell you why Miss Birling wants to stay on and why she says it might be better for her if she did. A girl died tonight. A pretty lively sort of girl who never did anybody any harm. And she died in misery and agony, hating life.
Don't, please. I know, and I can't stop thinking about it.
No, Miss Birling's been made to understand what she did to this girl. She feels responsible. And if she leaves now and doesn't hear any more, she'll feel she's entirely to blame. She'll be alone with the responsibility the rest of tonight, or tomorrow, or the next night.
Yes, that's it. And I know I'm to blame, and I'm desperately sorry, but I can't believe. I won't believe. It's simply my fault that in the end she committed suicide. That would be too horrible.
You see, we have to share something. There's nothing else we have to share. Our guilt.
Yes, that's true. I don't understand about you.
There's no reason why you should.
I don't know much about police inspectors, but the ones I've met weren't a bit like you.
Good evening, Inspector.
Good evening, madam.
I'm Mrs. Birling, you know. My husband has just explained why you're here, and while we'll be glad to answer any questions, I don't think we can help you much.
No, Mother, please.
What's the matter, Sheila?
I know it sounds silly.
What does?
You see, I feel you're beginning all wrong, and I'm afraid you'll say something or do something that you'll be sorry for afterwards.
I don't understand you.
We all started like that, so confident, so pleased with ourselves, until he began asking us questions.
You've made quite an impression on this child, Inspector.
We often do on the young ones. They're more impressionable.
You're looking tired, dear. I think you ought to go to bed. Forget about this absurd business. You'll feel better in the morning.
Mother, I couldn't possibly go. Nothing could be worse for me. We've settled all that. I'm staying here until I know why that girl killed herself.
Nothing but morbid curiosity.
No, it isn't.
Please don't contradict me like that. And in any case, I don't suppose for a moment that we can understand why this girl committed suicide. Girls of that class.
Mother, don't. Please don't. For your own sake as well as ours. You mustn't.
Mustn't? What? Really, Sheila?
You mustn't try to build up a kind of wall between us and that girl. If you do, then the inspector will just break it down.
I don't understand you. Do you?
Yes, and she's right.
I beg your pardon?
I said, yes, I do understand her, and she's right.
That I consider is a trifle impertinent, Inspector. What is it now, Sheila?
I don't know. Perhaps it's because impertinent is such a silly word. But Mother, do stop before it's too late.
If you mean that the inspector will take offence.
No, I never take offence.
I'm glad to hear it. Although I must say, it seems to me that we have more reason for taking offence.
Let's leave offence out of it, shall we?
I think we'd better, Mrs. Birling.
So do I.
I'm talking to the inspector now, if you don't mind. I realise you may need to conduct some sort of inquiry, but I must say you seem to be conducting it in a very peculiar and offensive manner. You do know, of course, that my husband was Lord Mayor only 2 years ago and that he's still a magistrate.
Mrs. Birling, the inspector knows all that, and I don't think it's a very good idea to remind him.
It's crazy. Stop it. Please, Mother.
They're right, you know.
Really?
Yes. Now, what about Mr. Birling?
Oh, he'll be back in a moment. He's only talking with my son, Eric, who seems to be in an excitable silly mood this evening.
What's the matter with him?
Eric? Well, I'm afraid he may have had rather too much to drink this evening. We were having a little celebration.
Isn't he used to drinking?
No, of course not. He's only a boy.
No, he's a young man.
And he drinks far too much.
Sheila!
I don't want to get poor Eric into trouble. He's probably in enough trouble already, but we really must stop with these silly pretenses. This isn't the time to pretend that Eric isn't used to drink. He's been steadily drinking too much for the last 2 years.
It isn't true. Gerald, you know him, and you're a man. You must know it isn't true.
Well, Mr. Croft.
I'm afraid it is. Actually, you know, I haven't seen much of him outside of this house, but I have gathered that he does drink pretty hard.
And this is the time you choose to tell me.
Yes, of course it is. That's what I meant when I talked about building up a wall that's sure to be knocked flat. Makes it all the harder to bear.
Yes, but it's you and not the inspector here who's doing it.
Yes, but don't you see? He hasn't started on you yet.
When necessary, I'll be glad to answer any questions the inspector wishes to ask me. Though naturally, I don't know anything about this girl.
We'll see, Mrs. Birling.
I've been trying to persuade Eric to go to bed, but he won't. Now he tells me that you told him to stay up. Did you?
Yes, I did.
Why?
Because I shall want to talk to him, Mr. Birling.
Well, I don't see why you should. But if you must, then please do it now. Get it done, have the boy, and let the boy go.
No, I can't do that yet, I'm sorry, but he'll have to wait.
Now look here,
He
Inspector.
must wait his turn.
You see?
No, I don't. Please be quiet, Sheila.
Inspector, I told you before that I don't like your tone, and I don't like the way you're handling this inquiry, and I'm not proposing to give you much more rope.
You needn't give me any rope.
No, he's giving us rope, so that we'll hang ourselves.
What's the matter with that girl?
Overexcited, and she refuses to go. Come along, what is it you want to know?
At the end of January last year, this girl, Eva Smith, had to leave Millwards because Miss Birling compelled them to discharge her. Then she stopped being Eva Smith looking for a job and became Daisy Renton with other ideas. Mr. Croft, when did you first get to know her?
Where did you get the idea that I did know her?
It's no use, Gerald. You're wasting time.
As soon as I mentioned the name Daisy Renton, it was obvious you'd known her. You gave us up away at once.
Of course he did.
And anyhow, I knew already. When and where did you first meet her?
All right, if you must have it. I met her first in March, sometime last year, in the bar at the Palace. I mean, the Palace Music Hall here in Birling.
Well, we didn't think you meant Buckingham Palace.
Thanks. I can see you're going to be a great help. You know, you said your piece, and you're obviously going to hate this, so why on earth don't you just leave us to it?
Nothing would induce me. I want to understand what happens when a man says he's so busy at the works that he can hardly ever find time to come and see the girl he's supposed to be in love with. I wouldn't miss
Be quiet, please. Yes, Mr. Croft, in the bar at the Palace Variety Theatre.
I happened to go down there one night after a rather long, dull day, and as the show wasn't very bright, I went down into the bar for a drink. It's a favourite haunt of women of the town.
Women of the town?
Prostitutes.
Yes, but here, in Bromley?
One of the worst cities in the country for prostitution.
Quite true, but I see no point in raising the subject.
I think it would be better if Sheila didn't listen to this story at all.
But you're forgetting I'm supposed to be engaged to the hero of it. Go on, Gerald. You went down into the bar, which is a favourite haunt of women of the town.
I'm glad. I amuse you.
Come along, Mr. Croft. What happened?
I didn't intend to stay down there long. I hate those hard-eyed, dough-faced women. But then I saw a girl who looked quite different. She was very pretty. Soft brown hair, big dark eyes. My God.
What's the matter?
Sorry, I suddenly realised, taking it in properly, that she's dead.
Yes. She's dead. Go on.
This girl was charmingly dressed, too, in a simple, inexpensive sort of way, and altogether she looked young and fresh and charming, and what shall I say, the opposite of hard and tough, and able to look after herself. She was quite out of place down there, and obviously she wasn't enjoying herself. Old Joe McGarty, half drunk and goggle-eyed, had wedged her into a corner with that obscene fat
But
carcass
there's
of his.
no need to be disgusting. And surely you don't mean Alderman McGarty.
Of course I do. He's a notorious womanizer and one of the worst sots and rogues in Bromley.
Well, really, Alderman McGarty. Well, we are learning something tonight.
Of course we are. But everybody knows about that horrible old McGarty. A girl I know, I just met at the town hall one afternoon and only escaped with a torn blouse.
Sheila!
Go on.
This girl saw me giving her a look and gave me a glance, obviously an SOS. So I went over and told Joe McGarty some nonsense that The manager had a message for him or something, got him out of the way. And then I told the girl that if she didn't want any more of that sort of thing, that she'd better let me take her out of there. She agreed at once.
Where did you go?
We went to the county hotel, which I knew would be quiet at that time of night. We had a drink or two and talked.
Did she drink much at that time?
No, she only had a port and lemonade or some such concoction. All she wanted was to talk, a little friendliness, and I gathered that Joe McGarty's advances had left her rather shaken as well, you might.
She talked about herself?
Yes, I asked her questions about herself. She told me her name was Daisy Renton, and that she'd lost both her parents. That she'd come originally from somewhere outside Brumley. She also told me that she'd had a job in one of the works here but had to leave after a strike. She said something about the shop, too, but wouldn't say which it was, and she was deliberately vague about what had happened. I couldn't get any exact details from her about her past life. She wanted to talk just because I was interested and friendly, but at the same time, she wanted to be Daisy Renton and not Eva Smith. In fact, I heard that name for the first time tonight. What she did let slip, though she didn't mean to, was that she was desperately hard up, and at that moment was actually hungry. I made the people of the county find some food for her.
Then you decided to keep her as your mistress?
What? Of course, Mother. It was obvious from the start. Go on, Gerald. Don't mind Mother.
I discovered not that night, but 2 nights later, when we met again, not accidentally, this time, of course, that in fact she hadn't a penny, and was going to be turned out of this miserable back room she had. It just so happened that a friend of mine, Charlie Brunswick, had gone off to Canada for 6 months and let me have the key of a nice little set of rooms he had in Morgan Terrace and asked me to keep an eye on them, use them if I wanted to. So I insisted on Daisy moving into those rooms at Charlie's, and I made her take some money to keep her going there. I want you to understand that I did not install her there so that I could make love to her. That came afterwards. I made her go to Morgan Terrace because I felt sorry for her and didn't like the idea of her going back to the Palace Bar. I didn't ask for anything in return.
I see.
Yes, but why are you saying that to him? You ought to be saying it to me.
Yes, I suppose I ought, Sheila. I'm sorry. Somehow...
I know. Somehow he makes you.
But she became your
Yes.
mistress.
Yes, I suppose it was inevitable. She was young and charming and warm-hearted and intensely grateful. I became at once the most important person in her life, you understand?
Yes. She was a woman. She was lonely. Were you in love with her?
Just what I was going to ask.
Now look here, I must object.
Why should you do any protesting? It was you who turned the girl out in the first place.
Well, really, I only did what any employer might have done. And what I was going to say is that I object to the way that my daughter, a young, unmarried girl, is being dragged
Your
into
daughter
this-
isn't living on the moon. She's here in Brumley too.
And it was I who had her turned out of a job at Millward's. And I'm supposed to be engaged to Gerald. And I'm not a child, don't forget. I've a right to know. Were you in love with her, Gerald?
It's hard to say. I didn't feel about her the way she felt about me.
Of course not. You were the wonderful fairy prince. You must have adored it, Gerald.
All right, I did. Nearly any man would have done.
That's probably about the best thing you've said tonight. At least it's honest. Did you see her every night?
No, I wasn't telling you a complete lie when I said I'd been very busy at the works all that time. We were very busy. But, of course, I did see a good deal of her.
I don't think we want any further details of this disgusting affair.
I do. And anyhow, we haven't had any details yet.
And you're not going to get any. You know, Mrs. Birling, it wasn't disgusting.
It's disgusting to me.
Yes, but you didn't come into this, did you, Mother?
Is there anything else you'd like to know that you ought to know?
Yes. When did this affair end?
I can tell you exactly. In the first week of September, I had to go away then for several weeks on business, and by that time, Daisy knew it was coming to an end. So I broke it off definitely before I went.
How did she take it?
Better than I'd hoped. She was very gallant about it.
That was nice for you.
No, it wasn't. She told me that she'd been happier than she'd ever been, but that she knew it couldn't last. Hadn't expected it to last. She didn't blame me at all. I wish to God she had. Perhaps I'd feel better about it.
She had to leave those rooms?
Yes, we'd agreed about that. She'd saved a little money over the summer. She'd lived very economically on what I'd allowed her and didn't want to take any more from me, but I insisted on a parting gift of enough money, though it wasn't so very much, to keep her going to the end of the year.
Did she tell you what she proposed to do after you'd left her?
No, she refused to talk about that. I got the idea once or twice from what she said that she thought of leaving Bromley. Whether she did or not, I don't know. Did she?
Yes. She went away for about 2 months to some seaside place.
By herself?
Yes. I think she wanted to be alone and to remember just what had happened between you.
How do you know that?
She kept a rough sort of diary, and she said there that she had to get away and be quiet and remember, just to make it last longer. She felt that there'd never be anything as good for her again, so she had to make it last longer.
I see. Well, I never saw her again, and that's all I can tell you.
That's all I want to know from you.
Well, in that case, as I'm rather more upset by this business than I probably appear to be, and, well, I'd like to be alone for a little while. I'd be glad if you let me go.
Go where? Home?
No, I'll just walk out somewhere by myself. I'll come back.
All right, Mr. Croft.
But just in case you forget, or decide not to come back, Gerald, I think you'd better take this with you.
I see. Well, I was expecting this.
I don't dislike you as I did half an hour ago, Gerald. In fact, in some odd way, I rather respect you more than I've ever done before. I knew anyhow you were lying about those months last year when you hardly came near me. I knew there was something fishy about that time. And now, at least you've been honest. And I believe what you told us about the way you helped her at first, just out of pity. And it was my fault, really, that she was so desperate when you first met her. But this has made a difference. You and I aren't the same people who sat down to dinner here. We have to start all over again, getting to know each other.
Sheila, I'm not defending you, but you must understand that a lot of young men...
Don't interfere, please, Father. Gerald knows what I mean, and you apparently don't.
Yes, I know what you mean. But I'm coming back, if I may.
All right.
Really, I don't know. I think we've just about come to an end of this wretched business.
I don't think so. Excuse me.
Well, really, I don't know.
You know, you never showed him that photograph of her.
No, it wasn't necessary, and I thought it better not to.
You have a photograph of this girl?
Yes, I think you'd better look at it.
I don't see any particular reason why I should.
Probably not, but you'd better look at it.
Very well.
You recognize her?
No! Why? Should I?
Of course, she might have changed lately, but I can't believe she would have changed so much.
I don't understand you, Inspector.
You mean you don't choose to, Mrs. Birling?
I meant what I said.
You're not telling me the truth.
I beg your pardon.
I really won't have this, Inspector. You'll apologise at once.
Apologize for what? Doing my duty.
No, for being so offensive about it. I'm a public man.
Public men, Mr. Birling, have their responsibilities as well as their privileges.
Perhaps, but you weren't asked here to talk to me about my responsibilities. You were asked here.
Let's hope not. Though I am beginning to wonder.
Does that mean anything, Sheila?
It means that we've no excuse for putting on airs, and that if we've any sense, we won't try. Now you're pretending you don't recognise her from that photograph. I admit, I don't know why you should, but I know jolly well you did, in fact, recognise her, from the way you looked. And if you're not telling the truth, why should the inspector apologise? And can't you see, both of you, you're making it worse.
Gerald must have come back.
Unless your son has just gone out.
I'll see.
Mrs. Birling, you're a prominent member of the Birling Women's Charity Organization, aren't you?
Go on, Mother. You might as well admit it. Yes, she is. Why?
It's an organization to which women in distress can appeal for help, isn't that so?
Yes, we've done a great deal of useful work in helping deserving cases.
There was a meeting of the interviewing committee 2 weeks ago.
I dare say there was.
You know very well there was, Mrs. Birling. You were in the chair.
And if I was, what business is it of yours?
Do you want me to tell you in plain words?
That must have been Eric.
Did you go up to his room?
Yes, and I called down on both landings. It must have been Eric we heard go out there.
Silly boy, where could he have gone to?
I don't know, but it was one of his queer, excitable moves. And even though we don't need
We
him,
do need him there. If he's not back soon, I shall have to go and find him.
He's probably just gone to cool off. He'll be back soon.
I hope so.
And why should you hope so?
I'll explain why when you've answered my questions, Mrs. Birling.
Is there any reason why my wife should answer questions from you, Inspector?
Yes, a very good reason. You remember that Mr. Croft told us, quite truthfully I believe, that he hadn't spoken to or seen Eva Smith since last September. But Mrs. Birling spoke to and saw her only 2 weeks ago.
Mother!
Is this true?
Yes, quite true.
She appealed to your organization for help,
Yes.
not as Eva Smith.
No. Nor as Daisy Renton.
First she called herself Mrs. Birling.
Mrs. Birling?
Yes. I think it was simply a piece of gross impertinence, quite deliberate. Naturally, one of the things that prejudiced me against her case.
Well, I should think so. Damned impudence.
You admit being prejudiced against a case.
Yes.
Mother, she's just died a horrible death. Don't forget.
I'm very sorry, but I think she only had herself to blame.
Was it owing to your influence as the most prominent member of the committee that help was refused to go?
Possibly.
Was it or was it not your influence?
Yes, it was. I didn't like her manner. She'd impertinently made use of our name, though she pretended afterwards it just happened to be the first she thought of. She had to admit, after I began questioning her, that she had no claim to the name, she wasn't married, and that the story she told at first about being a married woman deserted by her husband was quite false. It didn't take me long to get the truth, or some of the truth out of her.
Why did she want help?
You know perfectly well why she wanted help.
No, I don't. I know why she needed help, but as I wasn't there, I don't know what she asked from your committee.
I don't think we need discuss it.
You have no hope of not discussing Mrs. Birling.
If you think you can bring pressure to bear on me, Inspector, you're quite mistaken. Unlike the other three, I've done nothing I'm ashamed of, and that won't bear investigation. The girl asked for assistance, and we are asked to look carefully into the claims made upon us. I wasn't satisfied with her claim. It seemed to me to be not a good case, and so I used my influence to have it refused. And in spite of what has happened to the girl since, I consider I did my duty. So if I prefer not to discuss it any further, you have no power to make me change my mind. I've done nothing wrong, and you know it.
I think you've done something terribly wrong and that you're going to spend the rest of your life regretting it. I wish you'd been with me here tonight at the infirmary. You'd have seen this.
No, please. Not that again. I've imagined it enough already.
Then the next time you imagine it, just remember that this girl is going to have a child.
No. So horrible. Horrible. How could she have wanted to kill herself?
Because she'd been turned out and turned down too many times. This was the end.
Mother, you must have known.
It was because she was going to have a child that she went for assistance to your mother's committee.
And now look here, this wasn't Gerald Croft.
No, nothing to do with him.
Thank goodness for that, anyhow.
And there's nothing further you have to tell me, eh?
I'll tell you what I told her. Go and find the father of the child. It's his responsibility.
That doesn't make it any the less yours. She came to you for help at a time when no woman could have needed it more. You not only refused it yourself, but so did the others refuse it too. She was here alone, friendless, penniless, almost desperate. She needed not only money, but advice, sympathy, friendliness. You've had children. You must have known what she was feeling. And you slammed the door in her face.
Mother, I think it was cruel and vile.
I must say, Sybil, that when this comes out of the inquest, it won't do us any good. The press might easily get a hold of
Stop
it.
it, both of you. And please remember, before accusing me of anything again, that it wasn't I who turned her out of her employment, which probably began it all. In the circumstances, I was justified. The girl had begun by telling us a pack of lies. Afterwards, when I got to the truth, I discovered she knew who the father was. She was quite certain about that. So I told her it was her business to make him responsible. If he refused to marry her, and in my opinion he ought to be compelled to, well then he must at least support her.
And what did she reply to that?
Oh, a lot of silly nonsense.
What was it?
Whatever it was, it made me finally lose all patience with her. She was giving herself ridiculous airs. She was claiming elaborate, fine feelings and scruples that were simply absurd in a girl in her position.
Her position now is that she lies with a burnt out inside on a slab.
Now,
Don't stammer and yammer at me again, man. What did she say?
She said that the father was only a youngster, silly, wild, and drinking too much. There would be no question of marrying him. It would be wrong for them both. He had been giving her money, but she didn't want to take any more money from him.
Why didn't she want to take any more money from him?
Oh, a lot of nonsense. I didn't believe a word of it.
I'm not asking if you believed it. I want to know what she said. Why didn't she take any more money from this boy?
She had some fancy reason, as if a girl of that sort would ever refuse money.
I warn you, you're making it worse for yourself. What reason did she give for not taking any more money?
Her story was that he had said something one night while he was drunk that made her think it wasn't his money.
Where had you got it from then?
He'd stolen it.
So she came to you for assistance because she didn't want to take any more stolen money.
That was the story she finally told after I refused to believe her original story about being a married woman who was deserted by her husband. I didn't see any reason to believe that one story would be any truer than the other. Therefore, you're quite wrong to suppose I shall regret what I did.
But if her story was true, if this boy had been giving her stolen money, then she came to you for help because she didn't want this boy to get into any more trouble. Isn't that so?
Possibly, but it sounded ridiculous to me. Therefore, I was quite justified in advising my committee to refuse her claim for assistance.
You're not even sorry now, when you know what happened to this girl?
I'm sorry she should have come to such a horrible end, but I accept no blame for it at all.
Who is to blame then?
First, the girl herself. Secondly, the young man who was the father of the child she was going to have. If, as she said, he didn't belong to her class and was some drunken young idler, well, that's all the more reason he shouldn't escape.
But if her story is true, if he was
There's
stealing
no
money...
point in assuming
But
that.
suppose we do, what then?
Well, then he'd be entirely responsible.
So he's the chief culprit anyhow.
Certainly, and he ought to be dealt with very severely.
Mother, stop. Stop.
Be quiet, Sheila.
But don't you see?
You're behaving like a hysterical child tonight. And if you would take some steps to find this young man and make sure he's compelled to confess in public his responsibility, instead of staying here and asking quite unnecessary questions, well, then you really would be doing your duty.
Don't worry, Mrs. Birling. I shall do my duty.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. And now, no doubt, you would like to say good night.
Not yet. I'm waiting.
Waiting for what?
To do my duty.
Now, Mother, don't you see?
Oh, surely! I mean, it's ridiculous.
Now, look here, Inspector. You don't mean that my boy is mixed up in this?
If he is, then we know what to do, don't we? Mrs. Birling has just told us.
My God, but look here,
I don't
Inspector.
believe it! I won't
Mother. I begged you and begged you to stop.
You know, don't you?
Yes, we know.
Eric, I can't believe it. There must be some mistake. You don't know what we've been saying.
It's a good job for him he does it, isn't it?
Why?
Because Mother's been easy blaming everything on the young man who got this girl into trouble, saying he shouldn't escape and should be made an example of.
That's quite enough, Sheila.
You haven't made it any easier for me, have you, Mother?
But I didn't know it was you. I never dreamt. And besides, you're not that type. You don't get drunk.
Of course he does. I told you he did.
You told her? Why, you little sneak.
No, that's not fair, Eric. I could have told her months ago, but of course I didn't. I only told her tonight because I knew everything was coming out. It was simply bound to come out tonight, so I thought she might as well know in advance. I've already been through it, don't forget.
Sheila, I simply don't understand your attitude.
Neither do I. If you had any sense of
Just a
loyalty...
minute, Mr. Birling. There'll be plenty of time when I'm gone for you all to adjust your family relationships. But now I must hear what your son has to tell me, and I'll be obliged if you let us get on without any further interruptions.
Could I have a drink first?
No! Yes! I know he's your son and this is your house, but look at him!
All right, go on. I understand a lot of things now that I didn't understand before.
Don't get started on that. I want to get on. When did you first meet this girl?
One night last November.
Where did you meet her?
In the Palace Bar. I'd been there for an hour or so, 2 or 3 chaps. I was a bit squiffy.
What happened then?
I began talking to her, stood a few drinks. I was rather far gone by the time we had to go.
Was she drunk too?
She told me afterwards she was a bit, chiefly because she'd not much to eat that day.
Had she gone there to solicit?
No, she hadn't. She wasn't the sort, really. Though I suppose she didn't know what to do. There was some woman who wanted her to go there, but I never quite understood about that.
You went with her to her lodgings that night?
Yes, I insisted, it seems. I'm not very clear about it, but she told me afterwards that she didn't want me to go in, but that when I was in that state when one easily turns nasty and I threatened to make a row.
So she let you in?
Yes, and that's when it happens. And I don't even remember, that's the hellish part. Oh my God, how stupid it
Oh,
was.
Eric, how could you?
Sheila, take your mother to the drawing room at once.
But
You heard what I said. Go on, Sybil.
When did you see her again?
About a fortnight afterwards.
By appointment?
No, I couldn't remember her name or where she lived. It was all very vague. But I happened to see her again at the Palace Bar.
More drinks?
Yes, though this time I wasn't so bad.
But you went to her room again?
Yes, and this time we talked a bit. She told me about herself, and I talked too. Told her my name, what I did.
And you made love again?
Yes, well, I wasn't in love with her or anything, but I liked her. She was pretty and a good sport.
So you had to go to bed with her?
Well, I'm old enough to be married, aren't I? And I'm not married, and I hate these fat old tots around the town, the sort I see your respectable friends.
I don't want any of that talk
I
from
don't
you.
want any of it from either of you. Settle it afterwards. Did you arrange to see her after that?
Yes, and the next time, or the time after that, she told me she thought she was going to have a baby. She wasn't quite sure. And then she was.
Of course. And of course she was worried.
Yes, so was I. I was in a hell of a state about it.
Did she suggest you ought to marry her?
No, she didn't want me to marry her. Said I didn't love her and all that. In a way, she treated me as if I were just a kid, though I was nearly as old as she was.
So what did you propose to do?
Well, she had a job, and I didn't feel like trying for one, and she'd no money left. So I insisted on giving her enough money to keep it going, until she refused to take any more.
How much did you give her altogether?
I suppose about £50 all told.
£50? On top of drinking and going around the town? Where did you get £50 from?
I got it from the office.
My office?
Yes.
You mean you stole it?
No, not really.
What do you mean, not really?
This isn't my fault.
I'm sorry, Arthur. I simply couldn't stay there. I had to know what's happening.
Well, I'll tell you what's happening. He's admitted that he's responsible for the girl's condition, and now he tells us that he supplied her with money that he took from the office.
Eric, you stole money!
No, not really. I was going to pay it back.
We've heard that before. How could you have paid it back?
I'd have managed somehow. I had to have some money.
I still don't see how you could take as much as that without anyone knowing.
There was small accounts to collect, and I asked for cash.
Huh. Gave the firm's receipt and then kept the money, eh?
Yes.
You must give me a list of those accounts. I've got to cover this up as soon as possible. You damn fool! Why didn't you come to me when you found yourself in this mess?
Because you're not the sort of father a chap can go to when he's in trouble. That's why.
I don't want that talk from you. Your trouble is you've been spoilt.
My trouble is that I haven't much time. You'll be able to divide the responsibilities between you when I'm gone. Just one last question. This girl discovered that the money you were giving her was stolen, didn't she?
Yes. And that was the worst of all. She didn't want to take any more, and she didn't want to see me again. But, here, how did you know that? Did she tell you?
No, she told me nothing. I never spoke to her.
She told Mother. Sheila. Well, Eric has to know.
She told you? Did she come here? But she couldn't have done that. She didn't even know I lived here. Come on, what happened? Don't just stand there like that. Tell me what happened.
I'll tell you. She went to your mother's committee for help. Your mother refused that help.
Then you killed her. She came to you to protect me, and you turned her away. Yes, you killed her, and the child she'd have had too, my child, your own grandchild, you killed them both. Damn you! Damn you!
Eric, please. I didn't know. I didn't understand.
You don't understand anything. You never did. You never even tried.
Stand back, you hysterical young fool!
Stop! I don't need to know anymore. Neither do you. This girl killed herself and died a horrible death. But each of you helped to kill her. Remember that. Never forget it. But then I don't think you ever will. Remember what you did, Mrs. Birling. You turned her away when she most needed help. You refused her even the pitiable little bit of organized charity you had in your power to grant her. Remember what you did.
My God, I'm not likely to forget.
Just used her for the end of a stupid, drunken evening as if she was an animal, a thing, not a person. No, you won't forget.
I know. I had her turned out of a job. I started it.
You helped, but you didn't start it. You started it. She wanted 25 shillings a week instead of 22. You made her pay a heavy price for that, and now she'll make you pay a heavier price still.
Now, look, Inspector, I give thousands, just
You're
thousands.
offering the money at the wrong time, Mr. Birling. No, I don't think any of you will forget. Nor that young man Croft, though he had some affection for her and made her happy for a time. Well, Eva Smith's gone. You can't do any more harm. You can't do any good now either. You can't even say, I'm sorry, Eva Smith.
That's the worst of it.
One of Eva Smith's gone, but there are millions and millions of Eva Smiths and John Smiths still left with us, with their lives, their hopes and fears, their suffering and chance of happiness, all intertwined with our lives, with what we think and say and do. We don't live alone. We are members of one body. We are responsible for each other. And I tell you that the time will soon come when, if men will not learn that lesson, they will be taught it in fire, in blood, and anguish. We don't live alone. Good night.
You're the one I blame for this.
I'll bet I am.
Yes, and you don't realize yet all you've done. Most of this is bound to come out. There'll be a public scandal.
Well, I don't care now.
You don't care about anything, it seems. But I care. I was almost certain for a knighthood on the next honors list.
Oh, for God's sake. What does it matter now if they give you knighthood or not?
It doesn't matter to you. Apparently nothing matters to you. But I'll tell you one thing that may interest you. Until every penny of that money you stole is repaid, you'll work for nothing. Yes, and there'll be no more of this drinking round town, picking up women at the palace bar.
I should think not. I'm absolutely ashamed of you, Eric.
Well, I don't blame you. But don't forget, I'm ashamed of you as well. Yes, both of you.
Oh, drop that. There's every excuse for what both your mother and I did. It turned out unfortunately, that's all.
That's all?
Well, what have you to say?
I don't know where to begin.
Then don't begin. Nobody wants you to.
I behaved badly too. I know I did. I'm ashamed of it. But you're just pretending all over again that everything's as it was before.
You think that everything's the same as I was before? Haven't I just said that there'll be a public scandal unless we're lucky? And I'm the one who'll suffer.
Well, I don't know what to tell you.
Well,
When did the inspector come along? Was it after Father said that every man should stick up for himself?
What's
I
the matter
don't
now,
know.
Sheila?
Well, it doesn't matter much now, of course, but, I mean, was he really a police inspector?
well, if he wasn't an inspector, it matters a devil's a lot. It makes all the difference.
No, it doesn't.
Well, don't talk rubbish. Of course it does.
Well, it doesn't to me, and it oughtn't to you either.
Don't be childish, Sheila.
I'm not being. If you want to know, it's you two who are being childish, trying not to face the facts.
I won't have that sort of talk. Any more of that, and you leave this room.
That'll be terrible for her, wouldn't it?
I'm going anyhow in a minute or two, but don't you see? If all that's come out tonight is true, then it doesn't much matter who it was who made us confess. And it was true, wasn't it? That's what's important. And it's what we did that's important. And not whether a man is a police inspector or not.
He was our police inspector, all right.
That's what I mean, Eric, but listen, if it's any comfort to you, and listen to me, I have an idea, and I had it all along vaguely, but there was something very curious about him. He never seemed like an ordinary police inspector.
You're right. I felt it too. Didn't you?
I must say his manner was quite extraordinary. So rude and assertive.
And look at the way he spoke to me, telling me to shut up and so forth. And he must have known that I was an ex-Lord Mayor and magistrate and so on. Besides, the way he talked, I mean, you remember. I mean, they don't talk that way, and I've had dealings with dozens of them.
All right, but it doesn't make any real difference, you know.
Of course it does.
No, she was right, it doesn't.
That's coming from you. You're the one it makes the most difference to. You've confessed to theft, and now he knows about it and can bring it out at the inquest, and if necessary, carry it to court. He can't do anything to your mother or Sheila or me, except make us maybe look a little ashamed of ourselves in public. But as for you, he can ruin you. And then you tell us it doesn't make any real difference. It makes all the difference.
You know, all he did really was to make us confess. We hardly ever told him anything he didn't know already. Did you notice that?
That's nothing. He had a bit of information left by the girl, and he made a few smart guesses. But the fact remains that if you hadn't talked so much, she really had had very little to go on. And really, now, when I come to think of it, why you had to go letting everything come out that way beats me.
It's all right talking like that now, but he made us confess.
He didn't make me confess. I told him quite plainly that I thought I had done no more than my duty.
Mother.
The fact of the matter is, you allowed yourselves to be bluffed. Yes, bluffed.
Now, really, Arthur.
Oh, no, not you, my dear, but these two. The man obviously didn't like us. He was prejudiced against us from the start. It's probably a social, well, some sort of crank. And then, instead of standing up to him, you let him bluff you into talking about your private affairs. You should have stood up to him.
Well, I didn't notice you standing up to him.
No, because by that time you'd admitted you'd been taking money. What chance had I after that? I should have insisted on seeing him alone.
That wouldn't have worked.
Of course it wouldn't.
Really, the way you children talk, it's as if you're trying to help him instead of us. Now be quiet so your father can decide what we ought to do.
Yes. Well, we must do something and get to work quickly too. Is that right? Shall I go?
No, Edna'll get it. I asked her to stay up and make us some tea.
It might be Gerald coming back.
Oh, yes, of course. I'd forgotten all about him.
It's Mr. Croft.
I hope you don't mind my coming back. I had a special reason for doing so. When did that inspector go?
Only a few minutes ago. He put us all through it, Sheila. But Gerald might as well know.
Now there's no reason to let him know about all that stuff.
Well, whatever. We're all in it, you know. Up to the neck. But worse after you left.
How did he behave?
He was frightening.
If you ask me, he behaved in a very peculiar and suspicious manner.
The rude way he spoke to Mr. Birling and me was quite extraordinary. Why?
You know something. What is it?
That man wasn't a police officer.
What?
Are you certain?
I'm almost certain that's what I came back to tell you.
Good lad. You asked about him then, did you?
Yes, I met a police sergeant I know down the road, and I asked him about this Inspector Goole and described the chap carefully to him. He swore there wasn't any Inspector Goole or anybody like him on the force here.
Well, you didn't tell him.
No, I passed it off by saying I'd been having an argument with somebody, but the point is that this police sergeant was dead certain there hadn't anyone at all like the inspector who came here.
Real police inspector talking to us like that.
Well, you were right. There isn't any such inspector. We've been had.
I'm going to make certain of this.
What are you going to do?
I'll ring up the chief constable, Colonel Roberts.
Careful what you say, dear.
Of course. Brumley, 5721. I was meaning to do this anyway. I've had my suspicions all along. Yes, Roberts, please. This is Mr. Arthur Birling speaking. Oh, Roberts! Birling! I'm sorry to ring you up so late, but can you tell me, has an Inspector Goole joined your staff lately? Goole. Goole. A new man. About 6 feet tall, full head of hair, slender. Ah, yes. I see. Well, no, that settles it. Just a little argument we were having here. Yes, well, good night. There's no one who even looks like the man who came here. That man definitely wasn't a police inspector. As Gerald says, we've been hacked.
I felt it all the time. He never talked like one. He never even looked like one.
This makes a difference, you know. In fact, it makes all the difference.
I suppose we're all nice people now?
You've nothing more sensible than that to say, Sheila. You better keep quiet.
She's right, though.
You'd better keep quiet anyhow. If that had been a real inspector and he'd heard you confess.
Oh, Arthur.
Yes.
You see, Gerald, you don't happen to know the rest of our crimes and idiocies.
That's all right. I don't want to. What do you make of this business now? Was it a hoax?
Yes, of course. Someone put that fellow up to coming here and coaxing us. Believe it or not, there are people in this city who dislike me enough to do that. Now, we should have been on to it from the first, and I believe in the ordinary course I would have been. But coming like that, bang, on top of our little celebration, well, naturally it took me by surprise.
I wish I'd been here when he first arrived. I would have asked him a few questions before I allowed him to ask us any.
It's all right saying that now.
I was the only one of you who didn't give in to him. And now I say we must discuss this quietly and sensibly and decide if there's anything to be done about it.
You're quite right, my dear. Already we've discovered one important fact, that the fellow was a fraud and we've been hoaxed. And that may not be the end of it by any means.
I'm sure it isn't.
You are, eh? Good. Eric, sit down.
I'm all right.
All right, you're anything but all right. And you needn't stand there as if
As if what?
As if you've nothing to do with us. Just remember your position, young man. If anyone's up to his neck in all this, you are, so you'd better take some interest in it.
Oh, I do take some interest in it. I take too much. That's my trouble.
It's mine too.
Now look, you two, if you're still on edge, then the least you could do is keep quiet. Leave this to us. Now I'll admit that this fellow's antics rattled us a bit, but now we found him out. All we have to do is keep our heads. It's our turn now.
Our turn to do what?
To behave sensibly, Sheila, which is more than you're doing.
What's this use of talking about behaving sensibly now? You're beginning to pretend that nothing's really happened at all. And I can't see it like that. The girl's still dead, isn't she? Nobody's brought her back to life, have they?
That's just what I feel, Eric, and it's what they don't seem to understand.
Whomever that chap was, the fact remains that I did what I did, and Mother did what she did, and the rest of you did what you did to her. It's the same rotten story whether it's been told to a police inspector or to somebody else. According to you, I ought to feel a lot better. I stole some money, Gerald. I don't care now. Let him know. The money's not the important thing. It's what happened to the girl and what we did that matters. And I still feel the same about it. And that's why I don't feel like sitting down and having a nice, cozy talk.
And Eric's absolutely right. And it's the best thing any one of us has said tonight, and it makes me feel a bit less ashamed of us. You're just beginning to pretend all over again.
Look, for God's sake!
Arthur!
Well, I'm sorry, but they're so damned exasperating. They won't try to understand our position or see that there's a difference between a lot of stuff like this coming out in private and a downright public scandal.
And I say the girl's dead, and we helped to kill her, and that's what matters.
And I say either stop shouting or get out. Some fathers I know would have kicked you out of the house already, so hold your tongue if you want to stay here.
I don't give a damn now if I stay here or not.
Well, you'll stay here long enough to give me a listing of those people you took money from, yes, and to pay it back too.
But that won't bring Eva Smith back to life, will it?
And it doesn't alter the fact that we helped to kill her.
But is it a fact?
Of course it is. You don't know the whole story yet.
I suppose I'm going to prove now you didn't spend all last summer keeping this girl instead of seeing me, eh?
I did keep a girl last summer, and I've admitted it. I'm sorry, Sheila.
Well, I must admit you came out of it better than the rest of us. The inspector said that.
He wasn't an inspector!
Well, he inspected us all right. And don't stop dodging and pretending now. Between us, we drove that girl to suicide.
Did we? Who says so? Because I say there's no more real evidence we did than there was that that chap was a police inspector.
Of course there is.
No, there isn't. Look at it. A man comes here pretending to be a police officer. It's a hoax of some kind. What does he do? Very artfully, working on bits of information he's picked up here and there, he bluffs us into confessing that we've all been mixed up in this girl's life in one way or another.
And so we have.
But how do you know it's the same girl?
Oh, wait a minute. Let's see how that would work. No, it wouldn't.
We all admitted it.
All right, you all admitted something to do with the girl, but how do you know it's the same girl? Now look here, Mr. Birling. You sacked a girl called Eva Smith. You've forgotten, but he shows you a photograph and then you remember, right?
Yes, that part's straightforward enough. What then?
Well, then he happens to know that Sheila once had a girl sacked from Millwood Shop. He tells us her name is also Eva Smith and shows her a photograph, and she remembers.
Yes, the same photograph.
How do you know it was the same photograph? Did you see the one your father looked at?
No, I didn't.
And did he see the one the inspector showed you?
No, he didn't. I see what you mean.
We've no proof it was the same photograph, and therefore no proof it was the same girl. Now take me, I never saw a photograph, remember? He caught me out by suddenly announcing that this girl had changed her name to Daisy Renton.
And there was no proof that Daisy Renton was really Eva Smith.
Exactly.
We only had his word for it. And we only had his word that he was really an inspector. He could have been lying all the time.
Exactly, he probably was. Now, what happened after I left?
I was upset because Eric had left the house, and that man said that Eric didn't come back, and we'd have to go and find him, which made me feel worse even still. And his manner was so severe, and he was so
said I had seen Eva Smith only 2 weeks ago.
Those were his exact words.
And like a fool, I said, yes, I had.
I don't see, my dear, now why you did that. She didn't call herself Eva Smith when she came to see you with the committee, did she?
No, of course not, and I should have said so. But feeling so worried when he suddenly turned on me with those questions, I more or less answered him as he wanted me to answer.
But Mother, don't forget that he showed you a photograph of the girl before that, and you obviously recognized her.
Did anyone else see that photograph?
No, he showed it only to me.
Then don't you understand? We still no proof it was the same girl. He may have shown you the photograph of any girl who applied to the committee. And we don't know if she was either Eva Smith or Daisy Renton.
Gerald's dead right. He could have been using different photographs every time and we'd be none the wiser. We may all have been recognizing different girls.
Exactly. Did he ask you to identify a photograph, Eric?
No, he didn't need a photograph by the time he got round to me, but obviously it must have been the girl I knew that went round to see Mother.
Why must it?
She said she had to have help because she wouldn't take any more stolen money. And the girl I knew had already told me that.
Even then, that may have been all nonsense.
I don't see much nonsense about it when a girl goes and kills herself. You may be getting yourselves out nicely, but I cannot. Neither can Mother. We did her in all right.
Now don't be in such a rush to put yourself into court. That interview with your mother could have been as much of a put-up job as this whole inspector business. The whole thing could have been a piece of bluff.
How can it be? The girl's still dead, isn't she?
But what girl? There were probably 4 or 5 different girls.
That doesn't matter to me. The one I knew is dead.
Well, is she? How do we know she is?
That's right, you got it. How do we know any girl has killed herself today?
Now answer that one.
Look here, it all began with that.
That doesn't mean it's true.
As a matter of fact, it did begin with that. It began with this fellow announcing himself as a police officer. And we know now that he wasn't, just somebody hoaxing us.
I see what you mean, but for all that, I wouldn't be too sure about the hoaxing part. He didn't look like a hoaxer to me.
Of course he didn't. Otherwise, he would have been wasting his time. He had to give an impressive performance.
It didn't deceive me.
Perhaps not. But look, here, look at it from his point of view. Here we are, having a nice family celebration and feeling very pleased with ourselves. Now he has to work this trick on us. So the first thing he does is give us such a shock that after that he can bluff us all the way. So he gets right to work. A girl has died in the infirmary. Drank some strong disinfectant, died in agony.
All right, don't pile it on.
You see, just repeating it shakes you up a bit. And that's what he had to do. Shake us at once, and then begin questioning us. Until we didn't know where we were. Oh, let's admit it. He took us in all right. He had the laugh on us.
He could laugh his head off, like he really was all hoax.
Well, I'm convinced it is. No police inquiry, no one girl this all happened to, no scandal.
And no suicide.
We can settle that at once.
How?
By calling up the infirmary. Either there's a dead girl there or there isn't.
Well, it would look a bit queer calling up a discounted night, wouldn't it?
I don't mind doing it. Mind you, they may have a girl there who committed suicide from drinking disinfectant, and that may have given this fellow the idea of coming here and frightening us in the first place. But even if it is, we've no way of knowing if it's the one who's been talked about tonight.
And if there isn't,
Then obviously that's the final and definite proof that the whole thing's a setup. Now, we'll see. Brumley, 8986. Is that the infirmary? Yes, this is Mr. Gerald Croft of Crofts Limited. Yes. Yes, we're rather worried about one of our employees. Have you had a girl brought in who's died from drinking disinfectant or any suicide? Yes, I'll wait. Yes? You're certain of that? I see. Well, thank you. Good night. No girls died in there today. No girl's been brought in after drinking disinfectant. They haven't had a suicide in months.
There you are, proof positively. nothing but a lot of moonshine, nothing but an elaborate sell. Well, no one likes to be sold as badly as that, but for all that, what a relief. Gerald, a drink?
Thanks, I think I could do with just one now.
So could I.
You've argued this very cleverly, Gerald, and I am most grateful.
Well, you see, while I was out for a walk, I had time to cool off and think things out a little.
Yes, he didn't keep you on the run as he did the rest of us. I admit, he gave me a bit of a scare at the time, but then I had a special reason for not holding public scandal right now. Well, here's to us. Oh, come on, Sheila, don't look like that. It's all over now.
The worst part is that you're forgetting one thing I still can't forget. Everything we said had happened really had happened. If it didn't end tragically, then that's lucky for us. But it might have done.
But it's all different now. Surely you can see that. You all helped to kill her. And I wish you could have seen the look on your faces when he said that. And the artful devil knew all along that no one had died, and the whole story was bunkum. Oh, he was clever, all right. But he who laughs last, whatever it is. Going to bed, young woman?
I want to get out of this. It frightens me the way you talk.
Nonsense. You'll have a laugh over this yet. Fellow comes in and starts inventing.
He didn't invent what each of us admitted to doing, did he?
Well, what if he didn't? Look, you'd better ask Gerald for that ring you gave back to him, hadn't you? That'll make you feel better.
You're just pretending everything's as it was before.
I'm not.
No, but these others are.
Well, isn't it? We've been had, that's all.
That's all. So nothing really happened. So there's nothing to be sorry for, nothing to learn. We can all go on behaving just as we did.
Well, why shouldn't we?
I tell you, whoever that man was, it was anything but a joke. You knew it then. You began to learn something. And now you've stopped. You're ready to go on in the same old way.
And you're not, eh?
No, because I remember what he said, how he looked, and what he made me feel. And it frightens me the way you talk, and I can't listen to any more of it.
Well, go to bed then, and don't stand there being hysterical.
She's overtired. In the morning, she'll be just as amused as we are.
Everything's all right now, Sheila. What about this ring?
No, not yet. It's too soon. I must think.
Look at the pair of them. The famous younger generation who knows it all, and they can't even take a joke. Yes? Yes, this is Mr. Arthur Birling speaking. What? But no, but... That was the police. A young girl has just died in the infirmary after swallowing disinfectant. And an inspector is on his way here to question us.